Yeah, Dad always got a veterinarian, a student, between their junior and senior years. They're encouraged to work with a veterinarian for the summer. And Dad got them several years, and one of the very best was Warren Bowstead, and he became the veterinarian at Loudon.
Okay.
But he was really special. He was the brother I didn't have. He and John Sauer. I ended up with two brothers, see. But, oh, he was wonderful. And he would take one car and Dad would take the other, and they would go out and vaccinate horses for sleeping sickness.
But wasn't there some disease that pigs around here caught?
Cholera.
Okay.
And they had to vaccinate every pig for cholera.
Right.
And Dad would always get some young fella to help him, to work for him, especially during the summer. He had a number of different ones, Dean Warmoth and Dale Warmoth. They worked for him for years, and until they, got married and got a better job. Bill Ummestock was the last one. And but he had a lot of different ones, and you'd have to hold the hog upside down, and their back legs. You had to get a shot on each side. And Dad had a brush. It was flat. The brush went across the back of his hand, and then there was a handle down through the palm of his hand. And I used to go with him whenever I could. And he'd stick the brush in this green disinfectant, and on the hog he'd hit each side, and then he'd give him a shot, supposedly where the green disinfectant was. Sometimes he was in a hurry. If they had a couple hundred hogs, he might get in a hurry and miss the spot, but he tried.
Yeah. Hey, when you're working with those kind of animals, you got to do what you can when you can.
But then we had the cow wars.
Yes, we did, and Dad tried hard. That's written up in one of the Cedar County Historical Society books.
Okay.
And all the cows throughout the state were to be vaccinated. People were getting sick from a disease they got from milk that wasn't pasteurized.
Okay.
What nationality are you people?
German.
I was afraid of that.
All right.
It's okay.
There were some good Germans around here, and down by Loudon, I can remember when there were people down Loudon who still spoke German. Anyway, there were some good Germans around here, and they were good customers of Dad, and Dad really liked them as people. They were friends. But nobody was going to tell them what to do. You know what that's like?
I do.
Okay? I thought that'd be a good idea. Nobody was going to tell them what to do. And so they had the Cedar County Cow Wars, and they sent the National Guard or something from Des Moines, and they set up camp down at Tipton, and they went around to see that the cows all got vaccinated. And Dad did not want any part of it. Some of these men were friends. Not only were they people he did work for, but he liked them as people. They were friends. So he wanted to stay out of it. But there were some that wouldn't let these young whippersnappers near their farm. And so Dad did vaccinate for some people.
So they didn't want this. They didn't want
The government.
the
young
government.
whippersnappers to come on their farm.
Gotcha. To see that the cows were vaccinated.
But Dad could go
Gotcha.
and do it.
Okay.
Okay.
And
But they just didn't want somebody, it probably was important, needed to be done, but the government wasn't going to come in and tell them what to
Right.
do. So Dad did get involved in the Cedar County Cow Wars. But I think it was the National Guard actually set up a camp down at the Tipton Fairgrounds.
Oh, okay. Now, did they just make sure that the cows were vaccinated, or did they actually vaccinate the cows?
They had some young people with them who vaccinated, who
Okay.
were trained to do that.
Gotcha. Okay.
But they went around to see that they let them on the farm to do
Right.
it.
Yeah. Okay. Well, that would be an interesting thing to read about.
I can't think what else happened. It's been a long life,
Well,
94 years.
Well, and you've been talking for a good hour, so
Okay.
I imagine you need a direct glass of water.
No,
No? Okay.
but
Well, let's go back. You never finished talking about when the salesman would come through, they'd bring their sample cases.
yes, there were
And there
two
was the room
sample
at the
rooms
hotel.
at the hotel. When I was there, it was a great big living room. But if you came in the front door, instead of going up the steps, there was a door right there at the steps and then one at the back, and there were two sample rooms. And instead of going to each store in town, because there were 5 of them at one time, they'd set up their things in the sample room. And then the men from the different stores would take turns coming down to look at what they had to sell. Can you think of something, Dick?
Well, I was just gonna say, in addition to what you said about Grandpa and vaccinating the horses and the pigs, there was a year that there was a lab in Fort Dodge who made vaccine. I thought it was for swine brucellosis. And Grandpa bought all of the vaccine that they made, and that was one reason that Mechanicsville became known as the pork center of the world, that other
Well,
farms
he
around
got all
had
that
the,
he could from Abbott Laboratories, Haver Glover Laboratory.
in
He
Fort
got,
Dodge.
he had the,
And when I was little, he still had those pads of paper that the vaccine would come and sell him vaccine, and I would draw pictures of billy goats on those. One of the first things I learned to draw. But
and-
when I was in Ames, the church had kind of a round robin of you'd invite other couples to your house for supper. And one of the couples we invited, Marcella was the wife's name. Her husband had worked at the Ames Labs, the veterinary labs in Ames, and it's the state veterinary lab. And he asked where I was from, and I said I'm from Mechanicsville. He said, well, we still talk about there was a doctor in Mechanicsville, Iowa, who bought all of the vaccine that was produced by this lab, and he saved all the hogs in the Mechanicsville area, and it became the big hog production capital of Iowa because that year he'd saved all the hogs, and elsewhere in the state they lost their hogs. So that was swine brucellosis.
Yeah.
I wish I could, Marcella was his wife's name. That stuck in my mind because it's a unique name. I can't remember his first name off the top of my head, but
You know.
he verified what I had heard,
Yeah.
Okay.
that Grandpa had
I
saved the
would
pig.
wait I would go down to the band concert. I didn't play in the band, but I'd go to the band concert on Wednesday nights. Then I'd go over to Dad's office and wait till he was ready to come home. And I read his books, through some of his veterinary books. And the longest word I found was Macrocantharynchus hirudinaceus, and I can't tell you what it is anymore.
But you remembered the word.
Encephalitis was a big problem,
Yeah.
Yeah, oh,
which
yeah.
is a form of sleeping
Yeah.
sickness. ENCEPHALOMYELITIS. See, I could spell that one. But don't start me in the middle like that.
It's kind of like my last name.
Yeah, yeah,
You gotta say it fast or else you
yeah.
can't spell it.
So,
It's funny how that sticks with you though, something
Yeah.
like that.
mhm.
It's funny how something like that will
Yes,
stick
after
with
all
you.
these years, I do remember that. But I would go down for the band concert, and then I would wait till he was ready to come home, and so I was there the night Harry Gibbo had this office in the back. The back door for Seehusens, but that back door, and Harry Gibbo, and he was kind of a private banker, I guess you'd call him. And if the bank wouldn't loan them money, they'd go to Harry, and Harry would talk to them and reason with them, and he'd loan them the money, and by golly, they'd pay it off because Harry would work with them, where the bank said, no, I can't loan it to you. And so he always had money back there.
Huh.
And one Saturday night, and I was waiting for Dad to be ready to come home, and Dad always had the office door open in case some farmer came in. And we heard a bang, and somebody ran past Dad's door to go out the front door of that building. And Dad told me to sit there, and he ran to the back thinking Harry had been shot. And he had been robbed. And the fella had put black paint on his hands and on his face. But after he robbed Harry, he thought he'd cleaned off the black, and he went down to Highway Gardens, the dance hall down in Stanwood. And he hadn't gotten all the black off, and so they caught him right away.
Mm.
And I think I think his last name was Aki, but there might be
There was
Aki's
Aki's
living around, so
Yeah,
I'm
there
not
was-
sure.
There was Aki's around.
But he went down to Stanwood, and there was still black, and so they were able to catch him right away. But when I can remember, you could still see where the cops had pried that bullet out of the wood back in
Oh.
Seehuson's office.
Huh.
So, but I know Dad went rushing back there thinking Harry'd been shot. He didn't want me to see it. He told me to stay
Yeah.
right there, which amazingly I did. I can't believe I did. That wouldn't have been my thing, but I did that time.
He wasn't shot though, right? He wasn't
No,
shot.
he wasn't. He just
Okay.
shot into the wood.
Okay.
Mhm.
Good.
Yeah, no, he hadn't been shot, but he did get some money, but they got it back because he didn't get all the black off and went down
Sure.
to the dance at Stanwood, so. Anyway. And up in the next, I told you about the block where the hotel was, but up in the next block, why, I wasn't up there so much.
When I
My
was,
dad's office was there, and
oh, you're talking about on the side of Lamont's garage? Or the other side? When I was little, there were 3 grocery stores
yeah,
in the block where Tom Hall
Mm-hmm.
now has his place.
Lee's was on the corner, and then Rusty's was up there with the house attached to it.
And Joe's grocery store.
And
Joe's
Joe's
was in the
was in
middle.
the middle.
And somebody said that if you went to one grocery store, that's the one you went to. You never went to the other ones.
No, we did.
Oh, you did. Okay.
Yeah,
We
we didn't.
We
We only went
liked
to Lee's.
We
Yeah.
liked Lee's meat better.
Yeah, we only went to Lee's. Of course, my dad cut meat for him, so that was why.
But we shopped at Rusty's too. But Lee had the best meat, but we shopped at Rusty's.
Okay.
Bethany was a friend, and Rusty Reinhardt had stayed at the hotel for maybe 3 months when he first came to town. So we shopped there. But there were actually 4 grocery
Yeah.
stores because Bro still had
Yeah,
the one
his
across
bro
the
had
street.
his, yeah.
We'll come back later.
Could we come back later?
We will.
Okay.
Sorry.
It's okay.
Otto and Rory.
Oh.
They are cute and I enjoy them a lot. They're darling. Rory is a lover. He'll give the best hugs.
Oh.
They brought their bank books to show you.
Okay.
Oh,
good.
Tell them about
And
bank-
I will give them money to put in there. Yes.
Tell them about bank account number 1.
My mother was the first depositor in the Mechanicsville Bank, and I still have her bank book number 1.
Oh
Oh,
boy.
my goodness.
The cashier across from the hotel, there's a yellow house in the corner, and then that next house to it. Mr. Weeble. He was the cashier. They were just opening the bank. And of course, it was just across the street from the hotel, so there'd been a lot of talk about it. So Mother had saved her money, and she went down. The bank wasn't opened yet, so she went down, and Mrs. told Mother to go get him up. It's time he was up anyway. So Mother did, and he got dressed and took Mother up to the bank and put her money in, and she has the number 1 bank book.
Oh,
Oh. How old was she then?
Oh, just little. She couldn't have been more than 5 or 6.
Oh, my.
Oh, boy.
But grandmother was, of course, fixing breakfast. They served at the hotel, and she was
Yep.
fixing breakfast. So mother wanted her money in the bank, so she went down and got him up, and he took her up, put her money in the bank.
Isn't that adorable?
That is adorable. Yes, it is.
So it was all fun.
Yeah.
As I look back on it,
Mm-hmm.
it was fun. Dad had down the hill there, down Cherry Street, Farm Service has all of that now. What are they building?
What is that?
They're
For
making,
fertilizer?
Is that what
Yeah.
they're
I
gonna put
think
in
it's
that?
I think
to
is
make fertilizer.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's quite an operation. They're
It
Yeah.
looks like it'd be quite a thing.
Mhm.
Anyway, Dad had a barn on the east side of the street, and the lumber yard was on the west side of the street. And Jerry Sauer, whose father ran the lumber yard, was my best friend. And they had a big cement place out there with sand in it. Because you made your own cement. And you had to go get some sand to make cement. So we got to play on the sand. Once in a while we'd get carried away and get a little sand out, but we got scolded a little bit. It wasn't too bad. But Dad had the other side, and he decided they needed to train some more veterinarians, get some more practical training. And so he started the clinics, and he had them in Mechanicsville for 3 years. And he would get different veterinarians to come in and bring a sick animal and treat it, where other veterinarians could come and see what they were doing. The one veterinarian that I really remember who came and did that was Dr. Fowler, and he was one of the professors in the veterinary school at Ames. And I can remember him coming and doing some surgical work to show other veterinarians what to do. And they got veterinarians the last 2 years. It went on for 3 years. The last 2 years, they had veterinarians from 3 states that came.
Wow.
And it got to be too big. There was no place to serve their dinner at noon. It started in the Presbyterian church. And then eventually the 3rd year it went to the school, and they could serve them in the gymnasium. But the women had to do the cooking in the old school. You've seen pictures of the school. There was the old school to the west, and then there was this hallway, and then down steps to the gym, and there were more classrooms upstairs. But it was just too much work to serve it that way, to haul all the food from the kitchen so it went to Waterloo to the Dairy Cattle Congress grounds. But it was a really big deal for Mechanicsville. It was. They'd get so many people,
Wow.
and they'd do all these different surgeries and different things for other veterinarians to learn about. So Dr. Munger from Cedar Rapids used to help Dad with it, but it was still a lot of work.
Yeah.
And he'd have to have his barn all whitewashed and clean. And that's what made me, I mentioned that down there where Farm Service is, the lumber yard on one side, but Dad had the barn on the other side. I kept my pony there, and later I had a horse, and I kept them down there. And Barbara had a pony for a while.
Did-
She didn't like Bonnie the way I loved Pet.
So, I apologize, I went in the other room. Did you tell them why, the true reason that Mechanicsville was known as Pork Center of the World?
Well, they had, Wilbur Colby had a sale barn here. And farmers from all over brought their hogs to sell, and every farm had hogs. Like they said, they paid the bills. Your hogs from the time they're born until they go to market is 6 months. It's not that long.
Yeah.
That you can raise a hog from a little pig to 225, 250 pounds. and sell it. And but cattle, it takes so much longer from the time calf is born until it's sold. By it's a long time. So the hogs paid the bills, and but they bring them here. Wilbur Colby had the sale barn down along the highway,
Okay.
and they had to sale once a week. But trains would come through and bring cattle from Wyoming, Montana, wherever, bring young calves. And they, somebody from this area, one of them was from Morley that bought so many cattle out there. Can't think of his name. Anyway, he bought so many cattle out there, but there were others too. And the young calves they'd have shipped here, and then the farmers would back their trucks up and haul them to the farm. And but they all had to be tested and vaccinated. And so some nights Dad would work till after midnight with vaccinating and testing all the horses, or all the cattle that had come in on the train that day. And Fred Dickey would work late helping him, so he wasn't alone. Mother worried so, but Fred Dickey was always there, and he'd tell Mother, "Now don't worry, I'm watching over Doc. We're all right." But of course there were no cell phones then. Mother couldn't call to ask how he was. But there were an awful lot of feeder cattle came in by train. That was a big deal here for the farmers.
Sure.
And they raised they had the hay and the corn here to feed them, and they'd have a lot of feedlots that you don't see anymore. Those are all gone.
Yeah.
Most all gone.
Yeah. I think, I mean, we've got a good amount
Okay.
of stuff,
I
yeah.
bet for one day.
Yeah, definitely. Perfect. We'll let you stop. Well, this has been awesome. This has been great. Gosh, there's so much history
Oh, I
crammed
know.
into an hour and a
Yeah.
half.
Well, I was here and I loved spending time with grandmother and listening to the stories she told. Mother and I were not close at all, but grandmother and I were.
Okay.
So I loved hearing the stories that she told.
Well, and it's neat to hear, you know, when I moved here,
2 years ago.
22 years ago, you don't need to tell that story.
I won't.
Okay. When I moved here 22 years ago, you know, I'm from Cedar Rapids, so it was just a little town.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
You know, I don't know anything about it. And then now, you know, I'm on the history board, so
Uh-huh.
I'm learning all these things. Boy, Mechanicsville was a happening place.
It was.
It was an important
Luke
part of
is your
history,
father?
Yep.
actually.
He dug out from my... Did you work here at
No.
all?
No.
When he was working here and putting up the cement retaining, or the brick retaining walls? Okay. There had been an old house here, a huge, monstrous old house. And Barbara said she saw a picture of it one time. I can't believe there was such a big house and not have more pictures.
There wasn't
But
any pictures to speak
it
of.
had red glass in
There
one
was.
window, and I wanted them to save that. When they bought this, they had to buy 5 lots. The 2 lots up here and 3 back across the alley. And but Mr. Mackey he'd moved to Boone, and he was an elderly man. He didn't want anything left here, and so Dad had to buy all 5 lots. And he was glad to sell some to Barb and Marlin.
Yeah, we wouldn't have our house
Yeah.
if
So,
our mom and dad hadn't sold us.
but there was
But we
a
have.
huge big house that they tore down. They bought the place thinking they'd fix that up, but they decided it would be cheaper to tear it down and start new, and then we added the back on.
Okay.
And Luke dug out. You could see where there was a hard rain after he got it dug down there. And you could see where there had been a cistern or something. It really sunk down in. There were two of those places. One might have been a cesspool. I don't know.
What year did your folks build this?
Yeah,
What year?
1940
40, okay,
that they built this.
okay.
How long was the train depot here?
How long was,
The the depot?
The train depot.
The train
When did-
depot?
When did they take the depot down?
the which?
The depot, what year did they tear the depot down?
Oh, I don't know. I can remember the depot.
I can
Yeah.
too.
I can remember Mr. Walters worked there, but, one of the stories, during World War II, they wanted really heavy, fat hogs, and they used the fat somehow in making munitions. I don't know how you'd use fat in making dynamite or something, but they needed the fat, so they raised really fat hogs. As soon as World War II was over, they wanted the farmers to raise skinnier, more meaty hogs. And Dad just couldn't get it across to the farmers. So he decided he'd show by example. And he ordered a pig, a Yorkshire, not a Berkshire, a Yorkshire. They were the slim, meaty hogs that he thought farmers should be raising. And Mr. Walters called my mother on the telephone. Dad was out on a call and said there was this pig and she was starting to have her babies. And he didn't know what to do. He was an older man that had never farmed and he was really flustered. And of course, Dad was out on a call. Did you know Adolf Aaron? He bought
remember the
hogs
name.
for Wilson's. He bought hogs for Wilson's. And he went just east of Dad's barn. He had a barn there. And so Mother said, well, call Adolf. Well, of course, Adolf didn't know anything about it either. But Petunia had arrived in this big crate, and Adolf went over and was trying to calm Mr. Walters, and Dad finally got in, and he had a place all ready for him in his barn. So they got Petunia over there in time to have the last of her pigs, and Dad already had farmers lined up to take the pigs and try to raise leaner hogs. But we've had a lot of fun about Petunia.
They were asking about the train station. I think one of the most fascinating stories about the train station was what you heard, you and Barbara went when they talked about the Underground Railroad in Iowa.
Oh, yeah.
And he was talking about places all around that had special basements or something where they kept runaway slaves. And Dad found one of them when he was at Clarence Miller's farm.
Yeah.
They were putting up a grain bin and they came across a basement. And why would there be a basement out here? It
Oh.
clearly wasn't a root cellar. It was for the runaway
It was for-
slaves.
Oh.
That's
But,
awesome.
but Mom and Barbara were asked about, well, what about Mechanicsville? Because you've talked about places all
Yeah.
south of Mechanicsville. And he said, well, Mechanicsville was the destination.
Oh,
Oh.
If
The
they could
railroad.
get to me,
because of the
they could-
railroad.
Oh, yeah.
There
it's
were
depot.
Quakers down by Springdale. Springdale's the one down there.
Yeah, just
And there were
south.
Quakers down there, and they were helping the slaves to escape and get farther north. And if they could get to Springdale, and then they could get them to Mechanicsville, they could catch the train here in Mechanicsville.
Oh.
Be done.
Mechanicsville station master
Yeah.
would,
Would take them.
and a lot of them would arrive without traveling clothes, so it would be obvious if they tried to board the train with their ragged clothes.
Right.
Yeah.
So they would save clothes. A lot of the people around Mechanicsville would save old clothes so they could give them to the runaway slaves, and they could board the train and they wouldn't be recognized as runaway slaves because they had
Had
clothes
nice
that were
clothes.
suitable for traveling.
Huh.
Wow.
So
That's
Now, that's
interesting.
written up in one of the. I've got a book where that's written up. That might have been something put out by the county historical.
The county book.
Yeah. Oh, that's.
Huh.
yeah, I think that's one. The train station was still around when I was a teenager, so I would guess sometimes after 1963 63,
Uh-huh.
64.
It was there for a
Those
long
were down.
time.
It was there for a long time, but I
When
can't
I
remember when
was-
it got tore down.
Little, honest, I didn't do all these things, but I knew about them. They'd get long nails and put them on the track
Oh,
before
yeah,
the
we did
stover
that all
train
the
came
time.
through. And the nails would end up looking like fingernail files.
Uh-huh.
Honest, coarse fingernail files.
Which
Wow.
one do you have there? Yeah, that's when I look at that one all the time. I love that book.
We have that.
We have this one?
But the train would, the nails would look like coarse fingernail
I was gonna
files where
bring
the
that one
train
up to
had
the
gone
meeting
over
the
them.
other night and then I forgot it.
And another one that I honestly did not have anything to do with, but I knew about it. Some of the tricks they pulled on Halloween,
Oh my, yes.
and I didn't tell. But there's an awful looking greenhouse on South Street in
It's
that
supposed
block
to be
east
tore
of the.
down.
Yeah.
Why can't
Mr.
the
Mayor.
town have that taken down?
We're working on it.
Oh, good luck.
Yeah, I know.
It was an awful house when I was a little girl and lived at the hotel. For Nicolaisons lived there. Well, Gladys Rife, you knew her, was their daughter.
Okay.
But Nick was really mean. I mean, really mean. The children, and there were a bunch of children, and they were victims of child abuse. And the neighbors didn't like him either. So on Halloween, some of the boys watched until a lot of houses, most of them had had a toilet put in, but Nick Nicolaisen didn't put in a toilet. So they waited until he went out to the two-holer before he went to bed at night. And some of the boys went over and tipped it over so it was down, the door was down, and he was caught in there. And I did not have anything to do it, but I did know about it, and I didn't tell anybody what was going to happen. But that was a big deal on Halloween, was to tip over outhouses.
Yes, yeah. But that was everywhere.
Not with the,
Yeah.
That
not
was
with the man
everywhere.
in there.
So it wasn't
No.
cow tipping, it was outhouse tipping.
Yeah, yeah.
It wasn't cow tipping.